Hello, judges and jurors. Aaron here, back with another video. All rise for Neuvillette, our one and only judge in Genshin Impact. Now sit down and buckle up, babies, because this courtroom is a roller coaster, and we got a lot of cases to get through. But before we hop into the video, I just want to say that if you like my content and want to support me, why not take a bite out of that? Oh my god, that's a long word. C cookie flavored subscribe button. But technically they're not edible since they're more of a craft item based on the sea biscuit, so I don't know, maybe just lick it? I don't know. Let's hop right into the overview. Neuvillette, at his core, is a main DPS hydro unit with an emphasis on a charged attack playstyle. Neuvillette has a unique charged attack that charges up into a massive laser beam over 4 seconds to obliterate the enemy. This beam scales with Neuvillette's HP. It lasts 3 seconds, it hits 8 times, and it has a normal ICD. While this mega laser may take a while to charge up, if there are any source water droplets around, Neuvillette will absorb the droplets nearby to charge his beam faster. His laser beam only needs 3 source water droplets to charge completely, but how do you get these source water droplets? Neuvillette's skill and burst are key, as though they mostly deal damage, they also drop 3 and 6 source water drops respectively. All of these droplets have a duration of 15 seconds, which is close to the amount of time it takes to get off most team rotations. So you're looking to use his skill and or burst to generate droplets in order for Neuvillette to instantly charge his charged attack. His skill also deals Numa-aligned damage once every 10 seconds. Onto Neuvillette's passives, which help increase his damage potential tremendously. His first increases the base damage dealt by his charged attack when an ally triggers a hydro reaction. This damage bonus will normally be 130% and is not a percent multiplier, which is important. Instead, this passive offers a base damage multiplier, which is very rare, as prior to Fontaine, only 2 characters in the game had this type of multiplier in their base kits, and only 2 others obtained this type of multiplier from their constellations. While most other multipliers are placed in the same slot after flat damage values are added, a base damage multiplier is used right after the talent percent multiplier is multiplied with the scaling stat. So for Neuvillette, this would be his charge attack multiplier times his HP times this base damage multiplier. The difference between base damage multipliers and percent damage multipliers is pretty massive, since a base damage multiplier benefits much more from percent multipliers, but gains little benefit from flat damage bonuses and vice versa. That's enough about our little base damage multiplier lesson for now though, as it doesn't have too much of an impact on Neuvillette, unlike another character. So let's move on to his final passive, which grants him a hydro percent damage bonus the higher his current HP is, up to a max of 30%. It's slightly more complicated, but to keep it simple, think of this passive as the opposite of Hu Tao's. Neuvillette's main combo, if you want to burst every rotation, is pretty generic. Like most other characters, simply use his skill then burst to generate droplets and finish it off with his main on-field combo of 3 charged attacks. However, you could go without using his burst every rotation, especially if you don't have enough energy recharge or if you're dealing with shorter team rotations. In this case, his combo would alternate per rotation. On the first one, go through your team, then swap to him, use his burst, perform 2 charged attacks, and finish it off with an elemental skill. Because the source water droplets have a 15-second duration, they will last until Neuvillette comes on field again. At this point, perform a charged attack, skill, and then charged attack again. By the next rotation, his burst should be up again to continue alternating. This combo set of alternating rotations will be better for Neuvillette, since if you plan on using his burst every rotation, you'll need a lot of energy recharge. The second combo might decrease the total amount of charged attacks per rotation by a third, and it might decrease the total amount of bursts by half, but it makes up for it in the fact that a massive amount of resources can now go into more damage-oriented stats. This will usually leave the second combo style dealing about the same amount of damage as the first combo, but in almost half the time, increasing the DPS of Neuvillette tremendously. So I would only recommend using the second combo style and not worry about the first. As a final note, before moving on, if you ever end up starting combat without his burst while using the second combo style, simply start the rotation off with an elemental skill from Neuvillette before moving on to the rest of his team, then move on to his second rotation. After that, you can start alternating between rotations 1 and 2. Neuvillette's talent priority is pretty straightforward. A violent majority of his damage output comes from his charged attacks, so leveling that first is mandatory. After that, you can level his burst, though it's not that worth it since it's only damage and not even a great amount of damage. There's even less of an incentive to level it up too if you plan on using his burst every other rotation, so this should be leveled up next, though it is optional. Then we have a skill, which only deals about 2% of his total damage output. Yeah, you could skip this if you want. Otherwise, level it last. Onto his constellations, which are all dramatically different in value. Neuvillette's first constellation grants him a stack of his Ascension 1 passive and increases his interruption resistance in his charged attack to 100%, basically making it feel like he has a shield. This is a nice quality of life update for his charge attack. However, this constellation's true power is behind the first part. In some teams, this does not make a difference, but in others that can't proc all the conditions for this passive, this is incredibly powerful. In these teams, this constellation proves to be a strong 16% damage increase, which is very valuable. His C1 also directly impacts his C2, as this constellation increases the crit damage of his charged attack by 14% for each stack he has on his Ascension passive. However, because it's basically always stacked to full due to his first constellation, this will almost always be a 42% crit damage boost. This ends up leading to about a 10% damage increase, which is solid. His third constellation increases the level of his normal charged and plunging attacks by 3. This sounds minor, but when you consider that most of his damage comes from his charged attacks, and that the base damage of his charged attacks is incredibly important, it starts to sink in how important this is. This constellation is so good that it leads to a large 24% damage increase. This is massive, and it turns out to be his second best constellation just for the pure damage output. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have debatably his worst constellation. His C4 is terrible, as it summons one water droplet when he is healed once every 4 seconds. This would technically allow him to use another charged attack while he's on field. However, because optimal on-field durations do not normally exceed 10 seconds, and using another charge attack will guarantee he exceeds that 10-second duration, actually using this constellation will turn into a DPS decrease. His fifth constellation isn't too much better, as all it does is increase the level of his burst, which wasn't a significant portion of his damage. This will lead to a minor 3% damage increase to his total damage output, which is basically nothing. By contrast, his final constellation is absurdly strong. It increases the duration of its charged attack by 1 second for each water droplet absorbed. This essentially means you're getting the benefits of 2 charged attacks at the cost of 1. On top of this, his charge attack gains another property that fires 2 missiles once every 2 seconds at the target he's attacking. This attack's area is single target and will fire 2 times with the original duration or 3 times with the max duration. The missiles also have normal ICD, meaning they will apply Hydro twice for both durations. Though the duration increase may sound like a detriment once at C6, all that Neuvillette needs to do to generate enough droplets for that single charge attack is use his skill. This reduces any need for energy recharge on him, allowing all stats to go toward damage. All of these combined lead to an insanely massive damage increase of 11 to 35%, which is one of the highest damage increases of any constellation, while still offering some more utility for burning through many elemental auras. Like stated before, all of his constellations vary in terms of value. However, due to his already insane damage output at C0 and lack of any constellations with utility outside of his C6, I wouldn't recommend getting any. But if you plan to pull for some, you'll notice a rather large damage difference when upgrading. Onto artifact sets. Here, Neuvillette should only be run with the Marie Hunter set, as it allows him to deal 10% more damage than other sets like Heart of Depth, Barukasha, Wanderer's Troop, or any 2-piece options. Prioritizing this set is incredibly important, as just an okay build using it will be on par with a cracked build using any other option. For main stats on Neuvillette, you're looking for HP, attack, HP percent, hydro damage, and crit. You can swap out the sands for an energy recharge one if you want to use his burst every rotation, though it's usually not worth it. In terms of substats, you should be looking for about 125% energy recharge, but if you're looking to use his burst every rotation, this energy recharge requirement can shoot up to 225%. Certain weapons can lower this though, as a signature lowers this requirement to 200%, while Favonius Codex, Sacrificial Fragments, and Prototype Amber can all lower this to about 160%. After that, you're looking for specifically a crit ratio up to 100 crit rate and 200 crit damage. At this point, the use of more crit is diminished due to the major reliance on HP scaling. Only after reaching about 36,000 HP will it be beneficial to start building crit again. For weapon options, he has a pretty valuable array of choices. His best is the Rite of Eternal Flow. Because it reduces his burst cost by a decent amount, it gives him more HP to scale off of, it grants him a lot of charged attack damage bonus, and it grants him a masterful crap ton of crit damage. All of these buffs are significant to his damage output and shows as upgrading to this weapon will lead to a similar damage increase to your Neuvillette when compared to his first constellation, but it's all the time. Sacrificial Jade is the second best, and yes, it can be used on him. This weapon offers a great amount of crit rate and a great amount of HP, but each of these bonuses have their their own downside. This crit rate can be detrimental as the substat plus his artifact set places his crit rate at almost 75%, making little room for crit rate in terms of buffs and substat options. This is pretty easily remedied though, as crit damage and HP would then take priority over any crit rate buffs or substats when wielding this weapon. The HP percent granting passive effect has a similar issue, as it will be lost when using his burst every rotation, since he would be on field for about 12 seconds while this passive disappears after 10. In this case, using his burst every other rotation would be a simple fix, as it will decrease his on-field time and is usually better damage-wise anyway. However, I can't say I recommend this $50 weapon since the Prototype Amber and Favonius Codex are slightly behind and fighting for the third spot. Both of these weapons are fantastic and they offer some great utility while still letting Neuvillette deal some amazing damage. First is Favonius Codex, which offers Neuvillette the battery roll. Since he can proc the energy generating passive effect twice per rotation, this weapon will prove to be insanely powerful on him if paired with sub-DPS units with energy issues like Beto. Prototype Amber is also insanely powerful as it significantly reduces Neuvillette's burst requirement while also granting him a crap ton of HP to scale off of. This energy generating passive effect also helps him build up his burst with ease, though not as easily as Favonius Codex. The other benefit to this passive is the healing, as it allows Neuvillette to take up both the support and main DPS slot in the party. This will allow for another sub-DPS unit to be easily slot where that support would have been, which equates to more team damage. In terms of personal damage output, the one that turns out to be better than the others depends solely on how much energy recharge your Neuvillette has. If you have enough energy for Favonius Codex to let him burst every rotation, then Favonius is slightly better. If not, then Prototype Amber is better. However, generally speaking, Prototype Amber will be the better weapon, and can even be better than Sacrificial Jade. This is because he will take on the role of support, which makes room for more damage in the party. Since most sub-DPS units deal around 200,000 damage minimum, this extra damage source will usually more than make up for the damage difference between these two catalysts. So, while Sacrificial Jade might offer more upfront damage for Neuvillette, Prototype Amber will lead to a larger team damage output, making it his second best weapon option. But now let's move on to team compositions and synergy. For team comps, Neuvillette has a lot of options, especially if using Prototype Amber, but he has one massive detriment: his charged attack playstyle. Being focused around charged attacks is one of the largest detriments that can be granted to a unit, as very few characters have synergies with them. Despite this, he still has some great supports he can work with. While not many Hydro characters work with Neuvillette, all of Mona's buffs do, as she will grant Neuvillette a percent damage bonus, HP percent from Hydro Resonance, and some pretty decent battery potential. At the current moment, she seems to be his best Hydro support, and sliding her in a freeze team with him will end up making up for losing a stack from his Ascension passive. But in terms of best all-around support, that would go to Kazuha, as he offers an insane Hydro damage bonus and resistance dread for Neuvillette. These two should almost never be separated, especially since Kazuha can proc every reaction that Neuvillette needs to gain max stacks of his passive. Another support he works well with is Rosaria, who can chain freeze with him and can buff his crit rate. Finally, Xiangling can benefit greatly from Neuvillette, as he offers just enough Hydro application for her to consistently vape off of, similarly to Tartaglia and Xingqiu. Due to the massive amount of damage and Hydro application, plus the fact that he can be a healer, he can fit anywhere as long as you have some automatic reaction proccing. His ability to work well in Dendro teams is mainly reliant on his application, which he has a massive amount of, though not too much like Tartaglia, so he would be pretty great in Nilo teams, in many Hyperbloom team comps, and he can function pretty well in Fridge comps as an on-field DPS and Hydro applicator. He could also be used as an on-field character in the national comp, as he could replace Tartaglia in his international variant pretty easily, while Tartag will benefit much more from all of the attack buffs and can provide some grouping if he has the Viridescent Hunt. Neuvillette will be better for damage in single target situations and against small groups. Then there's freeze teams. Great supports for him here are Kazuha, Rosaria, and Mona, who are all some of his best, as they can buff Neuvillette's damage astronomically. Technically speaking, he can even work well as a duo DPS alongside Ayaka, since she spends a lot of her time off-field. This can especially work if he uses the Prototype Amber, as he will now also act as a healer for the team. But now let's move on to his rating. Neuvillette's damage is huge. It's one of the highest damage potentials of any character in the game at C0, especially in single target content. However, he is lacking somewhat against AoE content, so I'm going to have to give him a 4 for damage output. His application is also amazing, as it's fast enough to outpace most characters, but slow enough so he doesn't overwrite any auras that you want to keep up. The only downside to his application is that it's on field, so I'm going to give him another 4 out of 5 here. While he offers no buffs specifically, his Hydro application does technically buff and enable mini teams to exist and thrive. So while he does not offer offensive utility, I will still give him a 2 because he's Hydro. Neuvillette generates an average amount of energy, making his battery potential pretty average. However, due to his stat priorities, he can synergize incredibly well with Favonius Codex, as he could proc its passive twice while he's on field. While this doesn't turn him into the Raiden Shogun, it is still significant, so I will give him a 3 just because of Favonius Codex, which will make him slightly above average. Neuvillette's defensive utility is actually massive, since he constantly heals when he picks up his droplets, and since he has strong innate interruption resistance, he can tank through a lot of damage, making him a very strong and self-reliant on-field tank. However, when paired with Prototype Amber, he can single-handedly act as a defensive support, as it will make him even tankier while also healing up his entire team. So I will grant him a strong 4 out of 5 here. For flexibility and versatility, he has some compatibility issues due to his charge attack playstyle. He can also only be used on field, but while on field, he can be used in a variety of comps, and can fulfill multiple roles extremely effectively. So I will give him a 3 out of 5. So I'm going to have to give Neuvillette a 3.5 out of 5 stars, since he does everything that he wants to extremely well, but he does not do literally everything like Jinsho. But now it's time for me to pass the conversation on to you. What do you all think of Neuvillette? Do you think I'm wrong on something? Is there something I missed about him? Do you plan to pull for him? Did I convince you to plan to pull for him? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. But that's all I have for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye bye!